framework agreement on cooperation between the UN and the OSCE of 2019.
So we are. I will make this claim. The number one most hated by child molesters, apparently, because they will not leave us alone. Not
we
even
believe that the OSCE should add to the UN's efforts in the areas of its responsibility.
Why is it connected to YouTube? It's this solar
The
wind
Swedish chairmanship is taking place in difficult geopolitical and epidemiological
They're going to teach us a lesson.
The unstable world around the coronavirus pandemic is adding to a deepening crisis in trust in this area. Nonetheless, its broad geographical scope and its consensus rules make it a unique instrument for maintaining peace and stability in the Euro-Atlantic region. We note the acting chairmanship's activity at the beginning of its mandate in its efforts to personally get to grips with the situations on the ground. Ms. Ann Linde has already made visits to Russia, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. We hope that the chairmanship will keep to consensus approaches.
So I've now made 5 videos in 2 hours. Your plan is to get me to get as many possible videos out there as once. I don't understand your purpose.
And we'll get away from unbalanced views, or from promoting concepts that don't have universal support.
We're talking about terrorism.
We're living through a time when there is a loss of mutual trust in regional organizations, including in the OSCE. And therefore, the main mission must be to re-establish mutual understanding in resolving crises in the various regions. The main criteria for effectiveness here, of course, is assistance in conflict settlement. What's required of the OSCE is an objective approach to resolving the conflict in Ukraine and helping to have dialogue, direct dialogue between the parties, Kiev, Donetsk, and Luhansk, and also assistance in implementing what was approved by Security Council Resolution 2202, namely the Minsk package of measures. We hope that the Swedish chairmanship will guarantee the impartial work of the Special Monitoring Mission of the OSCE in Ukraine, and that the mission itself will carry out balanced monitoring on both sides of the contact line, including on human rights. This is directly stipulated by its mandate. There is a need to monitor, analyze, and report on discriminatory initiatives by the Ukrainian authorities towards the Russian language, national minorities, and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and to monitor the situation around freedom of speech and the media. Incidentally, violations of press freedom and actions against national minorities, including their civil and language rights, have in recent years become a scourge in a whole range of OSCE member states. And in the absence of condemnation from regional organizations, this situation is worsening. We call on the acting chairmanship and the specialized departments of the OSCE to pay particular attention to the degradation in human rights in the area of the organization's responsibilities. In connection with the statements by a number of our colleagues today concerning a mendacious interpretation of the situation in the Ukrainian conflict, I'd like to stress that it was their activities supporting the destructive steps of Kiev to sabotage the Minsk agreements that are a key challenge for security in the OSCE's region today. We call on the Western sponsors of the Maidan to work with those they sponsor to prevent distortions of reality and political provocation, to deal with the proper issues in the east of Ukraine, as stipulated by the Minsk agreements. Before accusing us of something, ladies and gentlemen, look at what you're doing. And stop turning a blind eye to flagrant violations of human rights, freedom of speech and of the press, which have also become, we've also seen the glorification of Nazism become an everyday occurrence. Not only in post-Maidan Ukraine, but also in the Baltic countries, in particular in Estonia. It will be useful not only for your reputation, but also for re-establishing trust and cooperation in the OSCE area. Madam President, we hope that under Ann Linde's leadership, the OSCE will be able to make a worthy contribution to the settlement in Nagorno-Karabakh and to give a new impetus to negotiations in the 5+2 format on Transnistria.
Oh, yeah, really?
We welcome the co-chairmanship by the United Nations and the OSCE of the Geneva discussions on the Southern Caucasus. We hope that the special representative of the acting chairmanship on the South Caucasus will be able to facilitate constructive contacts between Georgia, Abkhazia, and South Ossetia. We encourage you, Ms. Linda, to begin implementing what was proposed by Russia last year on
Here we go.
We're talking here about increasing the results from the work of the Secretariat, the institutions and various field missions, also optimizing the OSCE's measures and the preparations for the Council of Ministers, and striking a balance between the three baskets as they're known, and improving the budgetary process. It's also important to overcome the socio-economic consequences of the coronavirus pandemic. There's a need to help those sectors of the economy that have struggled, including tourism. We support the presidency's, or the chairmanship's plans rather, to devote attention to increasing women's participation in economic activity, but without a connection to Security Council Resolution 1325, which covers the involvement of women in peace processes. There's a need to correct the thematic and geographical biases in humanitarian affairs. The priorities include the fight against racism, neo-Nazism, the falsification of history, and the stoking of interreligious hatred. What also remains current is the issue of the collective development of a single methodology for election observation. Madam President, in conclusion, we'd like to wish the OSCE more active cooperation with the United Nations and its specialized agencies, and also with the various regional organizations, the CSTO, the Eurasian Economic Community, CIS, SCO, and others, on the basis of the cooperation-based security platform as adopted at the Istanbul Summit of 1999. We wish the acting chairmanship effective work, and we hope that it will be able to keep to its remit as an honest broker. Sweden can count on Russia's support for the initiatives to strengthen stability, trust, and cooperation between the OSCE member states. Thank you.
I thank the Russian Federation for his statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the United States. Foreign Minister Linda, thank you for your clear and comprehensive statement on the OSCE's priorities for 2021. The United States looks forward to working together with you on these important issues in your capacity as chairperson in office. As President Biden has made clear, the United States is renewing its commitment to multilateralism and transatlantic cooperation. We welcome and celebrate Sweden's prioritization of strengthening the OSCE's activities on the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. And as I said earlier this week, it's time for all of us to turn our commitments on the agenda into action. We need to do more to protect women, especially women leaders, from threats of silence and violence. As Foreign Minister Linda and others have noted today, the OSCE and the UN face shared challenges, ones we must address this year together. We just passed the 7th anniversary of Russia's invasion and occupation of Crimea and the launch of its aggression in eastern Ukraine. The conflict in eastern Ukraine has killed more than 13,000 people and wounded tens of thousands more. It has displaced more than 1.4 million people.
But Gazprom sponsors
and the aggression is far from over. In Crimea, Russian authorities continue to harass and imprison those who oppose this occupation, notably Crimean Tatars, ethnic Ukrainians, and members of other religious and ethnic minority groups. The United States will never recognize Russia's annexation of Crimea, and we will continue to hold Russia accountable for its aggression in eastern Ukraine. We welcome Sweden's reappointment of Ambassador Heidi Grau as special representative in Ukraine and in the Trilateral Contact Group. The special monitoring mission's presence and reporting on daily activities of violence has improved the situation on the ground. As council members, we owe it to the special monitoring mission's leadership and all of the brave monitors to do our utmost to ensure the mission can operate freely and without hindrance. In addition to its aggression to Ukraine, Russia continues to occupy nearly 20% of Georgia's territory while supporting or systematically ignoring abuses of Georgian citizens living in or near Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Russia has not yet fully implemented 2008 ceasefire, including its obligation to withdraw its forces to pre-conflict positions, or its commitment to allow unfettered access for humanitarian organizations.
It would have been more likely to do it if the United States didn't ask them to.
And territorial integrity. We urge the OSCE to push for Russia to end this occupation and implement the 2008 ceasefire agreement in full. In Belarus, we urge the UN and OSCE to press for, I'm sorry, I was cut off for a minute. The United States will continue to support efforts to facilitate a genuine national dialogue between the Belarusian authorities and the opposition, which would include representatives of the Coordination Council. The OSCE is well positioned to support the democratic aspirations of the Belarusian people, and we urge Minsk to engage with the OSCE. In Moldova, the United States supports the results-oriented 5+2 settlement process of the Transnistrian conflict.
What does that mean?
This settlement process should be based on Moldova's sovereignty and territorial integrity within the internationally recognized borders, with a special status for Transnistria. We will continue to support a sovereign, democratic Moldova that is firmly anchored in Europe and secure within its internationally recognized borders. We also welcome Sweden's support for the Minsk Group co-chairs in negotiating a long-term political settlement for the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Both sides should investigate all allegations of human rights and international humanitarian law violations. It is time to bring justice to those responsible. Both sides must engage with humanitarian actors to complete the exchange process for all prisoners, detainees, and remains. The United States will work closely with the OSCE to defend OSCE mission mandates, implement our collective decisions, and ensure that all participating states live up to our shared principles and commitments. We are in this together, and we wish Sweden every success in 2021. Thank you. I resume my function as President of the Council. Foreign Minister Linda, do you wish to respond to any points raised by council members?
Yeah, I want to know why the U.S. got to interject like that if you're also the shit.
Okay, thank you. First, let me say that I could see and hear you all the time, even if I understand that you couldn't see me at all the time. First, let me answer two distinct questions I got. One was about how the OSCE and UN can further the steps to support the solution in Ukraine. And I would appreciate the United Nations Security Council support through reminding all parties to uphold international law and the UN Charter and the international humanitarian law, and to remind the parties to fully implement the Minsk Agreement and as it is endorsed by the Security Council.
Oh,
the second issue on what issues the 5+2, it's on Moldova and Transnistria, where we can go forward. The most important right now is that the process continues in the right direction and does not deviate because of political problems. We are hoping to move forward in the 5+2 process on recognition of certain documents and to take steps regarding registration plates for cars. Other possible areas of progress could be in regard to the banking sector and the trolley bus line. This is very down-to-earth issues, but since I was there just 2 weeks ago,
I think that's what we call them electric ones we used to have.
for the people living there,
buses
we
with
can
the
move
double
forward on
pantograph,
those issues.
whatever you call
But as I said, it will be dependent on the political will
I
of
can't
the
believe how
parties.
badly that hurts.
And by that, I just would like to express my appreciation to all the members of the Security Council for sharing their reflections. It seems like we have a lot of shared commitments and common view and everything. I note our shared concerns on how to best contribute to resolving the conflicts and improving the lives of the people in our union. We, of course, look forward as the chairpersonship to strengthening the relation between the United Nations Security Council and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe throughout our whole tenure as chairperson. So thank you very much for your cooperation, and thank you for inviting me to speak and listen and talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Foreign Minister.
Damn.
There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
Oh, damn. Oh. Oh. Fuck, that hurt. I can hear the hum of their mics.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Patty Torsney, and I'm the IPU Permanent Observer for the to the United Nations. And it's my honor to present this news conference to you today. This map release is a highlight of the International Women's Week, and we've been producing this map since 2005. It's a map of women in parliaments, and it's an incredible collaboration between IPU and UN Women that produces this important document that's used right around the world. to graphically depict the status of women in parliaments. Very pleased to have with us today the Executive Director of UN Women, Vasily Malambo-Luka, and the Secretary General of the Interparliamentary Union, Martin Chong. We're going to hear from both of them, and then we're going to have a question and answer session, and then we will conclude. If anyone wishes to pose a question, I believe they put their name in the chat, and I will turn to them for comments. So without further ado, we'll hear from the Executive Director of UN Women, Vasily Malambo-Luka. Over to you.
Thank you, Patricia. I am honored to be here today with my long-standing partner, Martin Chong, the IPU Secretary General. Get to once again present together the 2021 map of women in politics. This year's map happens at a very critical time for women and girls who are disproportionately affected by the impact of the pandemic. We are also presenting this data just before the Commission on the Status of Women, whose theme is on women's participation and decision-making in public life. And women's leadership was also a theme of International Women's Day. So really, this is the theme to focus on at this point in time. It has been 15 years since the last time the Commission on the Status of Women focused on this issue of women's leadership. Back then, women were just over 15% of parliamentarians, and today they are 25%, which is progress, but too little, too slow. And today we are urging for greater and faster progress. We also note the fact that when women are underrepresented, all other aspects of gender equality stall. Therefore, women's leadership is a critical accelerator and enabler for gender equality through and through. And that is why we have to give it big, significant attention. For example, it is concerning us that for most of the world, it still remains a norm not to elect women. The fact that 22 countries are led by women, and the fact that gender parity in national legislature cannot be reached before 2063 if we move at this pace. And that is really the biggest message. This cannot happen. This shouldn't have to be. We need to use those special measures that can facilitate swifter and faster change. There's the whole issue of violence against women, which is a deterrent. Women find it difficult to be exposed to the violence which impacts on their family, their mental health, their well-being, only because they want to take part in addressing matters that affect their own lives. So addressing violence against women is also a critical part of this journey. We will have generation equality next year, which is our response to the gaps that we identified when we reviewed the implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action. We also need generation equality to accelerate the implementation of SDGs and now also to respond to the pandemic. Generation equality will also address the issue of women's leadership. So we call on everyone who will be listening to us today to jump into the bandwagon. There's a room for all of us to make this push together. Women in public offices play a big role in driving legislation that can impact everyone and across the board. So their own progress and the work they do while they in positions is also very important. And this is true also of the need to increase women in cabinets, because this is where major decisions are being taken. As we build back better, we cannot build back without women, because that will be building back bad. Building back better is greener, is gender responsive, and it is equitable. And this is the anthem that we want to sing to everybody. And we need everybody to always repeat that building back better is gender responsive, is green, and is equitable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Your comments ring true right throughout the world. The need to make sure that we are building back better and
better not be tearing ass out of that motherfucker. Here's the UN, so.
Scale of life male presenting statistics on gender equality. So it gives me the pleasure once again to present the IPU UN Women Map of Women in Politics this year. And we are pleased to report some good results, but I would like to say that the map paints a mixed picture. We have witnessed some gains, just as we have experienced some setbacks. So it's like making 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards. The good news is that the first time we are seeing that more women than ever before are occupying the highest levels of political power. And this is according to data available on the 1st of January. We witnessed that there is an all-time high in the number of countries with women heads of state or heads of government, 22 compared with the 20 last year. We also experienced that the global share of women holding ministerial portfolios has also seen a small increase, now standing at 21.9% as compared with 21.3% last year. Around the world, we have witnessed some dramatic increases in the share of women ministers in 2021. For instance, in Europe, the share of women in government went from 8% to 43% in Lithuania. Congratulations, Lithuania, for that achievement. And in Belgium, we witnessed a doubling of the number of women in ministerial portfolios, where we saw a jump from 25% to 57%. In fact, it is more than double. Then in sub-Saharan Africa, we see Namibia continuing to make great strides there, with an increase in the overall share of women ministers moving from 15% to 39%. In the Americas, I would like to single out the United States. The new cabinet in the United States is turning out to be the most gender balanced in the country's history. Women in charge of ministerial portfolios rose from 17% in 2020 to 46% in 2021. And if we go to the Pacific region, New Zealand maintains the largest share of women ministers at 40%, increasing by 10% compared to the previous year. But then, as I said, the map and the data we have paint a mixed picture. We have some bad news, and that is there is the persistence of widespread gender inequalities. The number of countries with no ministers, women ministers in 2021 increased to 12 compared to 9 in 2020. As of the 1st of January 2021, no women serve in the governments of Azerbaijan, Armenia, Brunei Darussalam, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Papua New Guinea, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, Vietnam, and Yemen. The number of countries in which women hold 50% or more of ministerial positions dropped from 14 to 13 in 2021. So this is information that we're bringing to you that needs to be seen in conjunction with the data that we published last week in the context of our annual Women in Parliament report. And Fumzile, you mentioned some of the statistics coming out of that report. We see, and I confirm that there is sluggish progress in the global growth of women legislatures. As at the 1st of January 2021, the global share of women in national parliaments is 25.5%, a slight increase from 24.9% the year before. When you consider that 70% of workers on the front line of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, healthcare workers, service workers are women, this level of representation is simply at odds with reality. And there is, as Fumzile has said, need for us to take more robust action to correct this imbalance in women's representation. And that is why I would stop at this point to say that it is up to us, both men and women, to keep pushing for greater representation of women in politics. We have the tools, and I speak for the parliamentary community. The tools are there, the powers are there in the constitutions of countries. It is important that political will be wielded and exercised in order to use those powers that are available, those tools that are available to drive up women's representation in political life. Thank you. I'll stop at this juncture, and together with my colleagues, we'll field any questions that you may have for us.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Fumzile. We have received 2 questions. One of those is, are there tried and true solutions that exist to improve to improve gender equality in Parliament? And if so, what? It's
not humid in here, really?
And the second question is Martin, you mentioned the pandemic, and of course, Fumzile, you did as well. Can you comment on the countries that have seen an increased, or the countries that have achieved a gender balance in their cabinets, and why it is important for women to hold ministerial positions as we go forward in this new territory? And I'll give it to you in either order, whichever.
Okay. If Fumzile doesn't mind, let me take a first stab. And first of all, I think what we did say, I said a moment ago that there are solutions out there that can help us drive women's representation, whether it's in Parliament or in government. And I'd like to mention something that we have stressed year in, year out, the need to adopt special temporary measures, for instance, quotas. And quotas, let it be clear, it is a recognition of the fact that the playing field currently is not level. You need to level the playing field so that women can begin to compete on an equal footing with men for political office. So we have seen, and there's ample evidence that where quotas have been implemented, women's representation has improved considerably. For instance, last year, we report that there were 25 countries out of 57 countries that held elections last year. And we saw that in those countries, there was an average increase of 11.6% in women's representation in Parliament, in the lower house of Parliament. In the upper house, I think it was 7.6%. So it is clear, and this is something that we have seen year in, year out, and we'll continue to advocate for well-legislated, well-designed quotas, whether it's reserved seats or special, what affirmative action in certain political parties in order to drive women's representation up. Now, when it comes to ministerial positions, I think the map is very clear. There are some 13 countries that where women hold more than 50% or at least 50% of ministerial positions. And when you look at those countries, they are predominantly European. I think there are about 6 to 8 European countries there. And those are countries that are very feminist in their outlook and practice. But we also have some other countries like Nicaragua in the Americas, that is top there. And I mentioned Nicaragua because I think this is symptomatic of the women's representation movement in Latin America. When we look at their representation in parliament, the Americas are first because, again, there are strong measures that have been taken to ensure that there are women in every rung of the political ladder. So where you have strong political will, when that will is translated into legislation, into policies, into strong advocacy within political parties, this can make a difference, and we see that. And I would like to report again that when it comes to ministerial positions, we are looking not only at the numbers. It is important to have more women in ministerial positions, but they should continue to hold positions where they can make a difference. It used to be that many of the areas where women were ministers were social affairs, women, health, and things like that. But we are seeing for the first time this year that the environment, natural resources, energy portfolios are now the most prominent portfolios held by women in the world. And we see them now as ministers of foreign affairs, many of them ministers of defense. It's no longer news that a woman is a minister of defense or minister of foreign affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And over to you, Vincent.
Canada's
if I could,
vice chief of defense staff is
to have women cabinet ministers, because that is the most important decision-making body in any government, and it's important to have women in the room. If we're talking about the recovery from COVID, for instance, this is a big responsibility that will define life for many countries, for many people into the future. There is a real risk that the inadequacies that have been shown under COVID can become even deeper if we do not take adequate steps in our recovery interventions, or we can change the status quo altogether, not go back to pre-pandemic status quo, but do something that is really futuristic. Now, we don't want all those decisions to be taken by men alone or with a minority of women. If we consider that COVID has impacted women disproportionately, you're talking about violence against women, you're talking about the loss of jobs, which is one of the most devastating impact of COVID. You're talking about girls dropping out of school, risking a lost generation. You're talking about burden of care. These are not decisions that need men to sit by themselves and decide for women how we're going to pull through after this. Women need to be there so that they can talk from their lived experience and from understanding how it is like to be in this position. And being in cabinet, being in parliament is all part of being there to contribute to the thought processes.
Thank you. And I know in my own country, 12 times as many mothers have left the workplace to care for children as fathers. So to provide that early childhood caring is an unequal burden. And we're seeing a disproportionate number of young women leaving the workforce, we're not getting back into the workforce, which is particularly troubling. I wonder, as a former parliamentarian, the effect too of people, young women, seeing women in parliament and how that allows them to dream of having that as a career. And I wonder if you might comment on that as well.
Well, not just in parliament, but in all areas, role models are very important. people believe in the possibilities that are out there for them when they see someone who looks like them being in a position. And it is important when one is in those positions, you are conscious of that. You are encouraging of others. You make it clear that this is not something that is unique to you. This is something that can be attained by everybody. So big yes to having role models who can inspire younger women and also women of the same age group. Yeah.
Sure, and I think you have a fabulous graphic of women standing on each other's shoulders and pulling up the next woman that we all need to do. There has been an increased incidence of violence against women politicians, and I wonder if either of you can comment specifically around what's behind this and how we can address it better.
So I didn't hear the question.
Sorry, together we've done some amazing research around violence against women politicians, violence, sexism, harassment. That's all too prevalent. And yet we've seen in the last year an increase in that violence, despite some people trying to take some measures to combat it. Is there something that's behind this increased violence against women politicians? And do you have some solutions on what can be done?
Well, let me just say something, then Martin, probably you come in. The violence against women has been normalized. That is why we are seeing this prevalence. Yesterday, together with the WHO, we released a study on the prevalence of violence against women. 1 out of 4 women experience violence against them, and now it starts at even younger age. So there is this challenge of violence against women impacting on all ages, and in that way people get socialized into thinking that this is just a way of life. So that is one problem that we have. We have to call it out. We have to make sure that there's consequences for perpetrators, because if we do not do that, then perpetrators feel they have permission to do whatever they want to do with women, because they can. There is no consequences for violence against women. We also have seen in the area of women and politics that there is an increase in cyber crimes against women, the bullying of women, the shaming of women, and that impacts on women's mental health, women's families, and that also discourages women from taking measures to avail themselves for public office. It is important for the law enforcement, for the authorities, for political parties to take steps against violence against women, because some of the violence that women experience comes from people in their own party. It comes from the parties that they're contesting against, and it comes from community members who don't think that they deserve to be there. So the institutions that are responsible for women being in positions must speak out, so that they stand with the women. They push back on the notion that women are not are getting out of their lane, that politics is not their lane. It should not just be women who are speaking for themselves. This is also where we call on male allyship, something that Martin knows a lot about, the importance of gender champions who are males, who must stand in front and make the case and argument about fighting discrimination against women and violence against women.
Thank you.
May I? Yes. No, thank you. Let me I may be drawing an artificial distinction between violence against women in general and violence against women in politics. We have seen a spike during this pandemic in violence against women. And I want to say that it is because of the stress, the additional stress that families are facing on account of the pandemic, that maybe they take it on the woman. But this does not excuse this scourge. It shouldn't happen. When it comes to violence against women in politics, this is something that we have been focusing on for the past, the IPU has been focusing on over the past 5 years. And what we have noticed is that the phenomenon is more widespread than people think. And it cuts across regions.
Two female Pakistani journalists got murdered in Toronto over the course of the year.
It's not happening. But no, in Europe, we saw that the level of violence, sexism against women is very high, comparable with levels in countries that are more conservative. So it is a problem that needs to be fought. But at the level of the IPU, we're not stopping at just saying, yes, it is there. We are working to find solutions with guidelines that can help parliaments stem the tide of violence against women. We want to see parliaments taking more robust action in order to banish violence against women in politics, which is, as Funzile was saying, to women's accession to political leadership. So we see parliaments, we want to see parliaments adopt them, in that we see them to address sexism, receiving reports, guaranteeing confidentiality for the victims, and also, as you said, Funzile, calling out the perpetrators and actually punishing them for this despicable act. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And I think on a societal level, I always encourage people to call their members of parliament, parliamentarians, when they agree with things, and to support them when they see these attacks. I do have a question from Catherine Fiakin. If you can open your microphone and pose your question, we'll go to you. You're from France 24. Yes.
Yes, hi, Patricia. Hello to all of you, and thank you for giving me the floor. I will just ask Mr. Martin Chungong to say a few words in French, because it will be very useful for French media. So, Martin, would you be kind enough to say a few words in French, please?
Merci, Catherine. J'ai perdu mon latin. Non, merci beaucoup pour cette occasion. Nous sommes réunis aujourd'hui pour lancer la toute récente réalisée par ONU Femmes et l'Union interparlementaire, et qui porte sur les femmes dans la vie politique, dans le leadership politique. Et nous voyons que le tableau que dresse cette carte est un peu mitigé. D'une part, il y a une progression en ce qui concerne le nombre de femmes chefs d'État ou de gouvernement, mais d'autre part, nous constatons qu'il y a eu des reculs en ce qui concerne le portefeuille ministériel. Donc, il faut faire en sorte, il faut prendre des mesures énergiques pour lutter contre ce recul. Nous avons vu pays nordiques en particulier occupent le plus haut rang en ce qui concerne la représentation des femmes dans le gouvernement, dans l'exécutif, et cela est reflété aussi au niveau du Parlement. Pour ce qui est de l'Afrique, que le Rwanda continue d'exercer le leadership en ce qui concerne la représentation des femmes tant au gouvernement qu'au Parlement. La Namibie aussi a enregistré des progrès énormes. Mais si on regarde le palmarès que nous publions aujourd'hui, nous constatons que le Nicaragua occupe le tout premier rang en ce qui concerne le nombre de femmes occupant de postes ministériels. Cela reflète aussi le rang qu'occupent les Amériques en ce qui concerne la représentation des femmes au niveau des parlements. Donc, le message que nous voulons véhiculer à travers la carte et les données que, certes, il y a eu des progrès, mais nous aurions tort d'être complaisants. Il faut toujours déployer des efforts énergiques en vue un peu plus, considérablement plus de postes ministériels, plus de postes parlementaires. Et je dois dire que si on constate aujourd'hui que dans le cadre de la pandémie, 70% du personnel de santé qui sont en première ligne dans la lutte contre cette pandémie sont des femmes, et que nous voyons que ces femmes ne représentent que le quart, disons, des effectifs parlementaires à travers le monde. Il y a une injustice en ce qui concerne la représentation de cette je dirais, section, cette composante importante de la société. Merci beaucoup.
I know Martin had mentioned the portfolios that are in our top 5, well, our top 5, but we actually report the ranking of the numbers of women in different portfolios. Celia, is there anything from that list that you thought was interesting this year? I know one year trade entered the top 5, which I thought was terrific, but not having seen that yet, I wonder what are the top 5 or if there's any surprises or excitement that you feel about that. Microphone.
Yeah. No, I am particularly grateful, Patricia, for the increase on the number of women ministers this year. I think that it is important to find a way of sustaining this growth and making sure that we also diversify the portfolios that women are occupying. But it's good that there are some portfolios that are historically made, that are becoming normalized, that are portfolios that men or women easily occupy. But of course, I'm also very worried about the fact that we still have parliaments that have no women at all. I think we really have to work very hard to address that. I remember Secretary General Ban Ki-moon had a challenge that he gave himself, that he wanted to make sure that before he leaves office, there isn't a country that does not have a woman member of parliament. And together every year we were checking and pushing. Oh, long after he's gone, we still have this problem. So, you know, we are seeing an increased number of women, great news. We are still seeing some countries that are digging in and not making we need and desire. So the work goes on, and we thank the countries that have taken the right steps.
Thank you. Martin, did you want to add anything, either about portfolios or about the issue of parliaments that don't have any women?
Well, for portfolio, it's clear. I would just be repeating myself that there has been an ongoing diversification of the types of portfolios that are occupied by women. And today in the world, there is no longer any particular portfolio that is off bounds for women. So that's very good news. For those parliaments that do not have members, there's no excuse. There are women in society, and I believe that in almost every country in the world, women account for more than half of the population, and it is simply unfair, unjust. Visible proportion of society should be left out of decision making. And at the level of the IPU, yes, we do that. We name and shame them through our report that we publish every year, which I mentioned that we launched last year. But we do not stop at just naming and shaming. We want to work with those parliaments concerned to see that women go into parliament, not because we want unqualified women in parliament. There's no paucity of qualified women around in the world, but simply because it's fair. And we are carrying out discussions currently with elections recently, and where no woman has made their way into parliament, and we're telling them it's not on, can we work together because of the need to have balanced representation. And as we've been saying throughout, there are tools that have worked, and all that is needed is political will and commitment on all sides, whether it's parliament, government, or political parties. We all have to work together, men and women, to drive up the...
One of the areas that the IPU has also been tracking is young members of parliament and their representation. Again, we know that parliaments that are more representative of the population by gender, by ethnicity, by religious beliefs, and by age are more effective parliaments. I wonder, Kimsili, if you have any comments on how to encourage more young women to run for office and how to support them when they are in office.
No, absolutely. Diversity is important. We need women in their diversity to be represented in parliament. In order to encourage young women to be elected, we need to remove the age limitations that you have in some parliaments. I think there are many countries that the age of eligibility is 35 and above. I mean, that is too old already. So we need to make sure that we remove those barriers in order to encourage and facilitate the entry of more women. And maybe political parties and parliament need to have special measures and quotas for young people. And then, of course, for the older and established parliamentarians, they need to go out of their way to support the younger parliamentarians, to mentor them, to sponsor them for leadership position in parliament so that they can be ranked and they can be in a position to demonstrate their leadership. So a concerted effort basically has to be made for this to be a reality.
Thank you. And Martin, the IPU has a very important tool that people can, parliaments can look and do an analysis and see how their working methods could be made more gender sensitive. Did you want to comment on that?
Well, yeah, thank you very much, Paddy. I think it's clear it's one of those tools that are out there that can be used on the self-assessment toolkit, which is we let you do your own assessment to see how gender sensitive your parliament is, and then we work with you to identify why it is that your parliament is not gender sensitive, and now we can together identify the solutions and the tools that are out there to drive up the numbers. And that's what I was mentioning a moment ago when I said that we're working with some of the parliaments where there are no women in parliament to see how we can drive up the numbers. We have to do some soul searching, we have to do some self-analysis, and then on the basis of that propose solutions. But when you mentioned the issue of role models, I think there is the practical example, if I'm not mistaken, of Jamaica, where I do understand that women's representation in parliament shot up because of the Kamala Harris effect. And I think many Jamaican women looked up to Kamala Harris as a model, and were spurred to go into politics. And of course, Jamaican society said, yes, if we can have such a high-profile woman in the major country in the world, why shouldn't we give a chance to our women? So I think that it is possible. It is possible to achieve gender parity, and we have to work at it, both men and women.
That's terrific. And there are some fantastic examples right around the world of women making a difference in countries be more successful for all citizens. When we add women, we get more success. So I will thank everybody for participating today. The map is available on our website. There are the tools we talked about on the website, ipu.org. You can subscribe to our monthly newsletter to join the mailing list. And I encourage all of you who are watching to call a female member, a parliamentarian, a member of Congress, and speak up and give that support, and to all of us to continue to work. And I thank Drusilla, you're an incredible team, and Martin, you're an incredible team who do this work to gather this information. It's a hectic schedule to put it all together and to produce this very important tool that helps people visualize what it means when you have more women. And I hope that we will all continue to go forth and have more women and more success.
39 through the mid-40s. Former movie actor Paul Sutton took over the role, followed greatly by Bruce Beamer.
This Peking duck recipe will leave you speechless. CGTN is live now.
By one of the station's sound effects men, Dewey Cole, and following Cole's death, my actor Ted Johnson.
No one
as a voice actor myself, and one who has played the role of cartoon character. I can tell you it must have been great fun being in the recording studio, watching those guys go through all the contortions while summoning up their inner dog, so to speak. And so we go to the night show called Uphill Sled.
The challenge of the Yukon. It's Yukon King, swiftest and strongest lead dog of the Northwest, blazing the trail for Sergeant Preston of the Northwest Mounted Police in his relentless pursuit of lawbreakers. And King on gold discovered in the Yukon, a stampede to the Klondike in the wild race for riches, backies of the gold rush, with Sergeant Preston and his wonder dog Yukon King as they meet the challenge of the Yukon. The trail down the hillside was steep and narrow. Shorty Sprague braked his sled hard to keep it under control during the sharp descent. Easy, Carter. Easy, Daddy. Easy. The passenger on Shorty's sled was a beautiful blonde girl clad in a lynx parka. Both Shorty and the girl had their eyes fixed on another dog team that was climbing the trail several hundred yards below them. Finally, the girl spoke.
Shorty, isn't that one of Dexter's men driving that sled?
It sure is, Miss Gilbert. His name is Joe Cook.
Joe Cook? Well, he's the worst of the lot.
He's big and he's mean.
Maybe we better pull over to one side and wait till his sled goes by.
Don't you worry, ma'am. We're going downhill, so we've got the right of way. Shorty took it for granted that the uphill sled would give way according to the custom of the trail. But as the two teams drew close together, he realized that Gold had no intention of pulling aside. A moment later, the two teams came face to face. Shorty halted his team with difficulty, barely in time to prevent a clash between the opposing sled dogs. He shouted angrily at Gold. Hey, what's the idea of blocking the trail? Hey, keep yours out of the way, Ray. The downhill sled has the right of way. It's your job to pull aside. Besides, I'm carrying the lady. Maybe you don't hear so good. I said get that team of yours out of the way. I'm not taking orders from you or any of the rest of Hassler's wood. The only direction this team is moving is straight ahead. For a sawed-off grunt, you're talking mighty cocky. I guess you need a little lesson in manners.
Don't you dare start a fight with Shorty, or you're twice as big as he is.
Don't you worry, Miss Gilbert. I've run up against polecat his size before. You? Oh! The golf punch caught Shorty squarely in the face and crumpled him over backwards with blood streaming from his nose and mouth.
You rotten boy!
That's just the beginning. When you see what else I'm going to do to him. All right. As Shorty struggled weakly to his feet, Gold was ready with another blow to the head. But Shorty rolled with a punch and came up fighting. He defended himself gamely, but the fight was unequal from the first. Gold was a full head taller than Shorty and at least 50 pounds heavier. In a few minutes, he had battered the smaller man into submission. I guess you learned your lesson, Sprague. Just to make sure you don't forget it. With deliberate cruelty, Gold jerked his helpless opponent up off the ground and smashed him in the face with another terrific punch.
You unspeakable beast.
Let me give you some advice, girlie. The Yukon is no place for a woman. If you're smart, you go back where you came from and stay there.
I came up here to operate my uncle's mine, and that's exactly what I intend to do.
All right, you've had your warning. I should team off the trail. Here, give me those traces. Oh, there you are.
Golf drove Shorty's sled into the snowbank on one side of the trail. And with a final threat to Marcia, he returned to his own sled.
Remember what I said. The Yukon is no place for a woman.
Marcia Gilbert was still trying to revive the unconscious Shorty several minutes later when Sergeant Preston drove up the trail.
What's he doing?
Looks like you've had some trouble here. Can I help?
Oh, I'd be grateful if you would.
I'm Sergeant Preston, Northwest Mounted Police.
And I'm Marcia Gilbert.
Glad to know you, Miss Gilbert. What happened to your friend here?
He was beaten up by a man named Joe Galt.
Joe Galt, eh? I'll soon bring him around. Incidentally, who is he?
His name is Shorty Sprague. He's one of my employees at the Snow Queen Mine.
So this brandy officer, holy smoke. What hit me? Take it easy, Shorty. The fight's all over. Who are you?
He's Sergeant Preston of the Mounted Police, Shorty.
Howdy, Sergeant. Guess I look pretty funny. Well, you've got a black eye and a split lip, but your nose is still inflated. It doesn't feel that way. Suppose you tell me what the fight was all about.
We were going downhill. Joe Galt was on his way up. I expected Galt to steer his sled off the trail.
He should have.
But he didn't. He blocked the way and tried to bulldoze me in the pull on the side. I gave him an argument. Guess maybe that was my mistake.
It didn't matter, Shorty. No matter what you did, he'd have found some excuse for picking a fight.
Well, let's go against Shorty.
Nothing. Except that he works for me.
What do you mean?
Galt wasn't acting on his own hook. He works for a man called Hackler, Martin Hackler.
I've heard the name. Heads of mining syndicate of some kind, doesn't he?
Yes, that's right, Sergeant. He's been buying up all the claims on the Last Chance Creek. The only property he hasn't been able to get his hands on is the Snow Queen Mine.
Which belongs to you.
Yes. I inherited it from my uncle 6 months ago. Hackler's been trying to buy me out ever since I took over the mine.
I take it you aren't selling?
You bet I'm not, Sergeant. The Snow Queen is worth twice what he's offering. Hackler thought it would be easy to swindle me because I'm a woman, and I'm new to the mining business. When he found out I wasn't quite so gullible as he thought, he changed his tactics.
How so?
He began trying to intimidate, to bully me into accepting his offer.
You should have
He
shot his
evidently
ass
intends to
up.
make things so unpleasant for me. I'll be glad to sell out.
So that's why Galt picked a fight with Shorty.
He and the rest of Hackler's men are right here on board. Shorty
Except for
here,
drinking
my
water.
former
Okay, that my
micro
bag
are the
with
only employees I have left.
I could arrest Galt on a charge of assault and battery, but he probably wouldn't get one in a few days.
my
in jail.
strategy, assault and
I still wouldn't
battery.
stop Hasley.
Born home, Ontario. I don't even know what they have.
A few days, look into the
I
matter.
thought I heard everywhere in
Maybe we get
Ontario.
something on
Roll
Hasley
Route 1.
justify illegal action.
Sergeant, if you could do that, it would... Well, it'd be wonderful.
All right, I'll see what I can do. Sergeant Preston drove to the Snow Queen mine with Marcia Gilbert and Shorty Sprague. Marcia introduced the sergeant to her foreman, Mike Muldoon, an elderly, bald-headed man who had formerly worked for her uncle. She also invited the sergeant to stay for supper. You said you used to work for Miss Gilbert's uncle, didn't you, Mr. Muldoon?
That's right, Sergeant. I worked for Dave Gilbert for over a year before he died.
How much gold are you taking out of the Snow Queen these days?
Oh, she's been paying about $100 a day lately.
Your operating expense must run nearly that high.
Oh, yes, it does. We're hardly making any profit right now.
Mine's not petering out, is it?
Oh, definitely not, Sergeant. The ore's running pretty low grade at the moment, but I have a hunch the vein gets a lot richer farther on.
I hope you're right, Miss Gilbert.
I'm sure of it, Mike. Uncle Dave wrote me just before he died that the Snow Queen was good for $400 or $500 a day. And he certainly wasn't the kind to make rash statements.
Quiet, King.
Sounds like someone's coming.
Looks like Joe Galt.
What?
That's who it is.
Galt. I wonder what he wants.
He's got a lot of nerve coming here after what happened today.
I'll go and talk to him. Yes? What is it? Someone here at the Snow Queen is stealing our gold.
Hold up there, big flies.
You've got no right to come around here and make a statement like that. You shut up. I'm doing it. All right. What I mean to say, you don't mind, but...
Mulder hasn't got the backbone to stand up to Galt. I'll go talk to him myself.
But still, Miss Gilbert, maybe I'd better have a few words with Joe Galt. What seems to be the trouble out here?
Hey. Marty.
That's right. I'm Sergeant Preston, Northwest Mounted Police, if you want a formal introduction. And you're Joe Galt.
How come you know my name?
I heard how you beat up Shorty Sprague on the trail this afternoon.
It was his own fault. I told him.
I won't argue the point, for the moment at least. Good. Just tell me what the trouble is right now.
The Snow Queen crew has been robbing us.
Can you prove that?
I know I can't prove it.
Then you'd better tone down your language.
Listen, Marty, you're not wise to the setup around here yet. If you were, you wouldn't...
I've seen enough to know that your accusation is probably untrue. Now, if you want to report a robbery, do it in the proper way and let the police make the charges.
I've already told you the Snow Queen crew robbed us. They took at least $1,000 worth. Either they kick through with that gold or I'm gonna...
You're going to what?
Mighty brave, aren't you, with that big Malamute to back you up?
King? Go back, fella.
Malamute.
Go on over there in the corner and lie down.
I'd be angry. You called my husky, my wolf dog, a Malamute. I'd be
Just stay quiet, boy, and don't...
Can't tell the difference between a Malamute and that was an insult. You said that on purpose. See what would happen. You ain't gonna like what happened. Malamute. I love Malamute, so it's not a fucking Malamute.
Gold steers solely at the lobby for
there you make a living on dogs, and you don't even know that fucks you up. I feed you to the dog, then I eat. I feed you to the dog, then I eat the dog.
Never mind.
Sorry, I'm not quite as small as Shorty. Maybe you could arrange to wear stilts at our next chat.
You're making a big mistake, Marty. My boss has plenty of pull in the right places. He can have you broken anytime he says a word.
This conversation never was very interesting, and it gets less interesting by the minute. You'd better be on your way, Galt.
I'm leaving.
I'll have those
You'll be hearing
guns.
mighty soon from Martin Hasler.
CGTN has a Peking duck recipe on Facebook Live right now.
Night at the mine bunkhouse. Instead, he pitched camp in the hills overlooking Last Chance Creek.
They didn't used to do so many videos
He
ago
waited
now.
for over an hour after seeing the last light glimmer out in the buildings at the Snow Queen mine. And then he announced to King, "Going down there, fella. Have a look inside that mine shaft. It's a little too much of a coincidence if the gold should start petering out just when Hasler's trying to buy the mine from Miss Gilbert. I've a hunch we'll find that the Snow Queen is just as rich as ever. Come on, King, I'll take a lantern to use inside the shaft." The Snow Queen mine consisted of a large tunnel into the hillside, with several crosscuts and side galleries leading off the main shaft. Sergeant Preston examined the cuttings in the main tunnel, and then began to explore the side galleries. Okay, the mine doesn't look any richer than what Lynn said. Maybe my suspicions are all wrong. It's better, Bob. You're right, someone's coming. Better blow out the boiler. Let's hope he didn't see the door. Sounds like he turned down the next gallery. Come on, King, we're forward. Creeping back to the main shaft, Sergeant Preston felt his way through the darkness to the opening of the next gallery. In the distance, he could see the glow
Keep your hand
of
over either the left hand always on the left wall or the right hand always on the right wall. You can find your way back up.
The man's back was turned toward Sergeant Preston. He was using a pick to loosen large chunks of earth and rocks from one wall of the tunnel. The sergeant watched for several minutes, and then stepped forward into the circle of light from the man's ladder. Hold up your hands, Muldoon.
Preston, what are you doing here?
I was about to ask you the same thing, but I guess there's no need to. It's quite obvious.
I just came down here.
To rob your employer, just as you've been robbing her ever since she took over the mine.
No, you've got me all wrong, Sergeant.
Don't lie, Muldoon. I wondered why the gold should start petering out just at this particular time. Now I know.
What do you mean?
The Snow Queen mine's just as rich as it ever was. But you covered up the biggest gold vein so Miss Gilbert wouldn't know it existed. I suppose you've been coming down here at night all along, chipping away at the gold and covering up your traces before morning.
You're pretty smart, Preston.
but not smart enough. As Muldoon spoke, he swung his pick and a sudden vicious blow at the sergeant's head. But the sergeant sidestepped, and at the same moment, King charged. Help! Help! Get this dog away! Let go of that pick and King will let you up. All right, I'll let go of it. All right, King. Let go, boy. Stand up, Muldoon. That's better. Now start marching.
Yeah, you have to be concise and talk clearly and fast when you're dealing with people. Don't listen when it comes to dogs.
Prisoner to the mine bunkhouse and held him there for the rest of the night.
I don't think
under
they
the
know
watchful
better.
eyes of King. The following morning,
The dog don't like you because you're doing something stupid.
So that's why the mine has been paying so poorly.
I didn't take very much.
Whether you took $10 or $10,000 doesn't matter. The point is I relied on you because you worked for my uncle. Now I find you're just a common thief.
Shall I arrest him, Miss Gilbert, or do you prefer not to prosecute?
What do you advise, Sergeant?
I doubt if you'll get your gold back, whatever you do. Furthermore, if you do press charges, you'll have to go to Dawson for the trial, which means you won't be here to keep an eye on the mine.
See?
Under the circumstances, I think you might as well let him go.
Very well. I'll do as you say, Sergeant.
You know he's going to be over at the other guy's camp.
Get your things together over at the bunkhouse and get off my property within the next half hour.
Now, where do you think he's going to go now?
I'm leaving right now.
Why did you ask me whether I wanted to prosecute, Sergeant? I thought you'd arrest him automatically in a case like this.
Ordinarily, I would. But I had a reason for letting him go.
What do you mean?
Has it occurred to you that Muldoon's little game fitted in very neatly with Hassler's interests?
I don't understand.
By covering up the richest ore streak in your mine, Muldoon made it seem that the Snow Queen was in danger of being
He has to sell the gold to somebody.
Maybe he was less interested in robbing you than he was in persuading you to accept Hassler's offer.
You mean he's really been working for Hassler all along?
It's possible. I think we'll find out for sure by letting Muldoon go free.
How will we find out?
When he leaves here on training, I have a hunch he'll go straight to Hassler.
Sergeant Preston's hunch proved correct. After leaving the Snow Queen mine, Muldoon went several miles down the creek on foot to the office of the Hassler Mining Syndicate. Martin Hassler, a heavy-set, bearded man, was chewing on a cigar and talking to his henchman, Joe Galt. He looked up in surprise as Muldoon entered the office.
Muldoon,
What was that, 1990?
what in thunder are you doing here?
I've been fired.
Fired? What for?
I was down in the mine last night, chipping away at the main ore streak. Mountie caught me red-handed.
You mean the same Mountie that run me off the property yesterday?
That's the one.
You blundering fool.
Was it my phone? How did I know he'd be spying on me?
You should have used your head, that's how.
This'll clear the whole deal.
Yes. You'll never sell now that she's found out about that hidden vein.
What are you going to do, boss?
I'm afraid there is only one thing we can do.
What's that?
Get rid of Miss Marcia Gilbert once and for all.
You mean kill her?
Let's not use that word, kill. What we'll do is blow up her cabin at night. Now, if she happens to be inside at the time, well, that'll be just too bad.
It'll be too bad, all right, for her. Only look, boss, isn't that taking an awful chance?
How so?
I mean that Mountie, Sergeant Preston. If anything happens to the dame, won't he suspect us right away? Yeah, that's right. You fellows are the first ones he'll think of. Now, wouldn't it be better to wait till he's out of the neighborhood?
Don't worry about the Mountie. I've got ways of putting the quietus on him. Official ways. Besides, even if he does suspect us, there'll be no way of proving we did it. So long as we don't leave any clues.
What do you want us to do?
There's a girl sleep right there at the mine office.
Yes, that's right. She uses the back room as her private living quarters.
All right, then listen. The three of us will go over and scout the place tonight. If the coast is clear, we'll plant some dynamite right under the office wall. Enough to blast the building to splinters. Then we'll light the fuse and make our getaway.
How much dynamite should we use? We don't want to cave in the mine tunnel.
We'll leave that to Muldoon. He knows all about blasting.
Okay, I'll handle the dynamite, but you two better keep a good lookout while I'm planting it.
Don't worry about that. Just be ready to start at 10 o'clock tonight. In the meantime, go on over to the bunkhouse and stow your duffel.
Mike Muldoon left the syndicate office. The The door closed behind him. Joe Galt turned to Hassler and said,
"You sure Muldoon ain't right about that Monty? Maybe it would be smarter to wait till he's out of the neighborhood."
Muldoon doesn't know it, but I'm counting on that Monty being around to investigate the explosion.
Huh? What's the idea?
Mike Muldoon just got fired this morning. That means he's got good cause for harboring a grudge against the Gilbert girl.
What about it?
When the Monty looks around for clues, suppose he finds Muldoon's body lying somewhere close by. Maybe
You attack
20
every.
or
I know you
30
nigger fucks are gonna attack every spirit.
Yeah, beginning to get it.
It'll look like Muldoon set the dynamite for revenge, but didn't use a long enough fuse. Before he could get away, the stuff exploded.
And Muldoon got knocked out by flying wreck.
Knocked out, or maybe even killed. How'd it sound?
You're a smart man, Hassler. A mighty smart man.
Unknown to Hassler and his two henchmen, Sergeant Preston had trailed Muldoon down the creek to the syndicate office. Returning to the Snow Queen mine, the Mountie reported what he had seen to Marcia Gilbert.
Then you were right, Sergeant. He's been working for Hassler all along.
Looks that way. In any case, he's on Hassler's side now.
What do you suppose they'll do next?
I don't know. It may be something drastic.
Why do you say that?
Well, now that you know about that rich vein of gold, Hassler probably figures you'll hang on to the mine tighter than ever. They'll have to do something drastic to get it away from them.
You're right. I never thought of that.
Does the prospect scare you?
Not a bit, Sergeant.
Good. I rather think Hassler will overstep himself on his next move. When that happens, we'll have him right where we want him.
Are you going to stay here at the mine till he shows his hand?
No, I don't think I'd better. That might scare them off. However, I will camp in the hills where I can keep an eye on things. And I'll have King patrol your property at night.
In that case, I certainly won't worry. You know, I have almost as much faith in King as I do the mounted police.
Whoa, you got that backwards.
Marcia Gilbert had gone to bed, and the cluster of buildings at the Snow Queen mine were shrouded in darkness. Only the northern lights flaming across the sky relieved the gloom of the Yukon night as Martin Hassler and his two companions approached their destination.
What about the dynamite, Muldoon? Are you sure you brought enough to do the job right?
Don't worry. I've got just the right charge. When the blast goes off, the mine office will be blown to smithereens. But the tunnel will hardly be touched. But just make sure the fuse is plenty long. We don't want the stuff going off in our faces.
At that moment, King was patrolling the wooded slope just in back of the mine buildings. His keen ears caught the rustle of underbrush and the faint whisper of voices in the distance. Pricking up his ears, he trotted forward in the direction of the sound. A moment later, the shifting wind conveyed to his nostrils the scent of human beings. Instantly, the great dog charged down the slope. It was Galt who first heard King's snarls and saw the charging husky loom up out of the darkness. Look out! King's first assault had knocked Galt off his feet. A second later, he turned to deal with Hassler, who was kicking at him wildly, fearful of the husky's slashing fangs. Meanwhile, Muldoon had dropped the sticks of dynamite he was carrying and was running toward the mine entrance.
Huskies and wolf dogs' fangs don't slash, they crush. They crush. They destroy the bones. Crunch.
Struggling violently to ward off the dog's savage lunges.
Look out, I'll get him.
Husky whirled
There's no warding that off.
The blow struck King on the head, leaving him dazed and bleeding. Again, Muldoon swung, and this time the great dog sank to the ground unconscious.
Good work, Muldoon.
What do we do now, boss?
Muldoon, you gather up the dynamite and light it up in the mine office.
You can't fend off the lunges.
I'll go over on the
So
other
one
side
time I'm
of the mine
smoking a
building
joint
and
with
keep
my
a lookout on
dog.
that side. And while I'm at it, I'll
It's just for
listen
fun.
if anyone starts moving around in the bunkhouse.
Now wait, what happens when I'm through planting the
You got,
dynamite?
you got both wrists in less than a second.
Standing by that big pine
Just
over
touch,
near the bunkhouse. And we'll
Bro.
circle back and join Galt on this
Well,
side.
that's good to know.
Understood?
Yes,
I won't ever try to
Don't forget, Muldoon.
have a fist fight with you ever.
A short time before King attacked the three crooks, Sergeant
You only
Preston had
touched
left
the
his
skin.
camp and headed toward the Snow
Their
Queen mine.
jaws will crush up
He
bones.
intended to inspect the area periodically throughout the night to make sure that all was well. As the sergeant neared the mine, Gold heard his footsteps approaching through the darkness. The crook ducked hastily out of sight behind a clump of rocks.
Holy smoke. It's the Mountie.
For a moment, Gold's hand strayed toward his gun, and then he realized that the noise of a shot would ruin Hassler's carefully laid scheme. But he knew, too, that he must act quickly before the Mountie discovered his companions. As Sergeant Preston passed directly in front of his hiding place, Gold sprang out at the Mountie.
I'll fix you, Mountie. Oh, yeah, that's me. And how do you like this?
The crook's sudden attack caught Sergeant Preston off guard, and he staggered under the impact of Gold's terrific punch. But he recovered quickly and smashed back at his assailant.
You should keep your left up, Gold.
Like you, Gold struck out savagely, but this time Sergeant Preston blocked the blow. The Mountie slashed back. For the next few minutes, the two men slugged it out toe to toe. Gradually, Gold weakened under the sergeant's punishment. Twice he went down, and as he picked himself up the second time, Sergeant Preston said,
"Well, what about it? You had enough?"
Yeah, I've had enough, Mountie. Don't hit me again.
With his attention concentrated on the fight, Sergeant Preston had failed to hear Hassler and Muldoon sneaking up behind him. Now, as Gold struggled weakly to his feet, Hassler stepped forward and brought the butt of a revolver smashing down on the Mountie's head.
Got here just in time, Hassler. What are we going to do with the Mountie now that you've knocked him out?
I'll tell you, Muldoon. We're going to do the same thing with him that we're going to do with you.
You knocked Muldoon out, too.
Yeah, this was as good a time as any. Now we'll have to drag them both over near the mine office.
You're going to fix it so the Mountie gets blown up, too?
It's the only thing we can do. Come on, hurry up, give me a hand. That fuse isn't going to burn forever.
Yeah. Gold half dragged, half carried the limp body of Sergeant Preston, while Hassler did the same with Muldoon. The mine foreman's body was deposited about 20 yards from the mine office. Then Hassler lifted the sergeant's leg.
Here, I'll help you carry the Mountie.
Where do you want him put?
Right up next to the mine office, near the dynamite.
What's the idea?
We want to make sure Muldoon can be recognized. But the Mountie, it doesn't matter. In fact, it'll suit me fine if he's blown to bits. Okay. All right, lay him down right here.
Yeah.
Why would it matter if he was recognized? They'll still show up looking for somebody. Whoever didn't
Let's get out of here.
make it.
Meanwhile, the great dog King was stirring painfully at the spot where the three crooks had left him. As consciousness came flooding back, the dog's instinct told him that his master was in danger. He sprang up and began running back and forth frantically.
Hydro power plants up in the water levels.
What are you doing, Chomo?
The great dog sprinted forward. Warily, King circled past the two men running side by side through the darkness. Guided by his nostrils, he headed straight for the spot where he knew his master must be
you're so good at this answer. What are you doing, Mr. Child Molester?
Such an object from past experience.
You're still alive, and that
the fuse with his trail-hardened paws.
Trail-hardened paws.
The sergeant began licking his face.
Oh, what are you doing now? I can hear it clicking it. I can see it.
Hassler stood waiting.
Oh, fuck off.
Something must have gone wrong.
Yeah. We dumped Preston. There wasn't more than 30 seconds left in that fuse.
What do you suppose happened?
The fuse fizzled out. That's what happened. Come on. We'll have to go back and light it again.
Sergeant Preston was just coming to as Gold and Hassler approached the building. In the darkness, the two crooks failed to realize what was happening till they were less than 10 yards away.
Hey, look, Hassler. It's the Mountie's dog.
Yeah, you're right. And the Mountie's getting up on his feet.
I'll soon fix that.
Gold reached for his gun. Before he could draw, King charged toward him at lightning speed. The revolver was barely out of his holster when the great dog leapt on the crook, knocking the gun from his hand. A second later, the other crook recovered from his confusion and made a frantic effort to draw. But by this time, Sergeant Preston was on his feet. As Hassler reached for his gun, the Mountie fired from the hip.
Call your dog off, Preston.
All right, King, let him up, boy. I'm good. Get up on your feet, Gold.
Yeah. All right. Just don't let that dog get any closer.
Who's that lying over there on the ground? Is that Muldoon?
Yeah. It's him, all right.
If he's dead, you'll both hang.
He's not dead. He's just unconscious. We were going to wait till after the explosion and then...
Shut up, you fool!
So you were planning an explosion, eh? I suppose you intended to blow me up along with Miss Gilbert, then leave Muldoon's body nearby so it would look like his work.
It wasn't my idea. It was Hassler's. He planned the whole thing.
You sniveling fool.
Doesn't matter who planned it. You were both in on it. You'll both stand trial